Farmers and ranchers know firsthand that Congress isn't the only group in Washington that can have an impact on our business. From EPA to USDA, federal regulations can hit the beef industry hard, especially for those raising cattle on federal lands. And joining us now to share some insight on this important topic is Kaitlynn Glover, Executive Director of the Public Lands Council and NCBA Natural Resources, and Sigrid Johannes, Associate Director of the PLC and NCBA Natural Resources. Kaitlynn, for those who may be unfamiliar with the Public Lands Council, tell us a little bit about the organization and its goals.
Sure. So I'm very fortunate to have this dual role with the Public Lands Council and NCBA, because the Public Lands Council is the only organization in Washington dedicated solely to this question of representing the rights and interests of those who raise cattle and sheep on federal lands. It blends really nicely with my role here at NCBA, because NCBA is a member of one of the affiliates of the Public Lands Council, along with the American Sheep Industry Association, as well as the Association of National Grasslands. Together with our three national affiliates, we work with members across the West, across 14 states where federal grazing permits occur, working with 12 state associations to make sure that their permittees, those who are the primary caretakers of so many of those federal acres, know that they have people here in Washington fighting just for them.
So Sigrid, you've recently joined the PLC, and tell us just a little bit about your background and your role with the organization.
Sure thing. So I did just start with the Public Lands Council and the NCBA Natural Resources team. Prior to that, I was actually still with NCBA, but working on the communications team. So got a little bit of experience translating those issues to our audience, both inside and outside of agriculture. I actually grew up in Washington, D.C., which throws people for a loop sometimes, but it means that I have a big factor in common with 98% of Americans who didn't grow up in an agriculture background, and with a lot of the people who are making decisions that impact federal grazing permittees from both a legislative and regulatory standpoint.
Kaitlynn, let's talk about 2021. What were some of the key accomplishments of the past year?
Well, when you talk about accomplishments here in Washington, D.C., sometimes they're so fleeting. You know, whether you're talking about regulatory wins or legislative wins, those can change with the presidency. And that's really what we were working through most of last year. You know, the prior administration had made some huge strides in the Endangered Species Act, grazing regulations on BLM lands, and a number of other issues as well. So last year, we spent all of our time building relationships with the new administration, continuing to build that legislative foundation, that knowledge base in Congress, to make sure that we were well set up for this year. Last year was that relationship building phase, but we did see some victories in moving the discussion forward about the role of grazing. And it comes down to one line, that grazing is conservation. Whether you're in Wyoming, in California, or with our producers in Florida on the NCBA side, grazing is conservation. We saw huge success in that discussion point last year.
Couldn't agree with you more. Let's talk next year. What are some of the key goals and objectives on the agenda?
Well, we have quite a full agenda, not only for this year, but for next year as well. While the administration spent last year planning and reviewing things from the prior administration, now is where the rubber meets the road. In talking with all of our colleagues here in the Washington office, you know that the docket is full of regulations that are going to be changed or tweaked, in some cases rescinded. We also have a full legal docket as well on the Endangered Species Act and large predator side with wolves and a number of other issues. But we continue to move that conversation forward, that ball forward, using grazing as a role in fuels reduction, promoting grazing as an incredible tool to make landscapes more resilient, and really cementing the place for these producers on the landscape across the West, but then also across the country, where we really want to see these open, healthy green spaces for all Americans to enjoy. That's what this administration wants to see, and that's what our members give them.
Sigrid, question for you. Why is the work that you do in Public Lands Council important to the entire beef industry, not just those of us in the Western United States?
That's a great question, and I think it goes back to something that Kaitlynn said, that grazing is conservation and grazing is good. You have just over 24,000 federal grazing permittees between the Bureau of Land Management and the U.S. Forest Service, who in total provide just under $15 billion of ecosystem services per year. That's a massive proof point that we can take to decision makers in Washington on the good work that ranchers are doing to reduce fine fuel loads and reduce the risk of wildfire, to fight those invasive species, to make sure that landscapes are healthy and balanced. And I think the other side of that would be that the issues that public lands ranchers are dealing with are certainly unique, but they also have some reach that is very universal across the country. Whether you're dealing with vultures, panthers, gray wolves, predator species are a problem no matter where you go. And things like conservation and soil health and carbon sequestration, those are issues that we're hearing a lot about and are seeing a lot of focus on from this administration in every part of the country. So that work between the Public Lands Council and NCBA lets us speak with one larger and more unified voice.
Thanks for coming to the show. Hope you'll come back sometime, and thank you for all you do on behalf of our industry. Now, for more information on how PLC supports cattle producers who hold public lands grazing permits, be sure to visit the website publiclandscouncil.org.